a gun, pointed directly at my daughter's face. I heard a voice shout, "Freeze!" and my blood just ran cold. It wasn't a robber, not a criminal, not some madman from the city. It was the head of security for our own homeowners association, right here in our quiet suburban neighborhood. The reason? My daughter looked suspicious, returning to her own house at 10 p.m. What this man, Marcus Finch, didn't know, couldn't possibly have known, was that my daughter, Cassie, is an FBI tactical commander who has led some of the most dangerous, high-risk operations in the country over the past 5 years, and things only went downhill from there. My name is David Sterling, and I'm a 58-year-old retired diplomatic officer. I spent 3 decades navigating the complex political landscapes of foreign governments, and I thought I'd seen it all. Until I moved to Maple Creek Estates. This place was supposed to be perfect, with its pristine lawns, winding roads, and the promise of peace and luxury living. What they didn't advertise in the glossy brochure was the petty dictatorship masquerading as a homeowners association. My wife passed away a few years ago, and I just wanted a beautiful, quiet place to settle down. Maple Creek seemed to tick all the boxes. Little did I know that their tight security would become a living nightmare. My daughter Cassie is 26. Unlike her diplomatic father, she chose a more action-oriented career path. After graduating at the top of her class, she rose through the ranks of the Bureau with a speed that still amazes me. When she called to say she was coming home for a few weeks of R&R after a 2-year international assignment, I was ecstatic. We'd been in Maple Creek for about 3 months, and I was so eager to show her our new home. The HOA was run with an iron fist by Victor Thorne, a former corporate executive with a God complex, and the real enforcer of his petty tyrannies was Marcus Finch, a former police officer who'd been dismissed from the force for, well, excessive use of force. The incident happened on a Friday night. Cassie's flight was delayed, and she arrived at the gate around 10 p.m. I'd forgotten to inform security about her arrival, a simple, honest oversight. As I waited in the living room, I heard raised voices outside. I opened the front door and froze at the sight. Marcus Finch had his gun drawn, a Glock 19, and pointed directly at Cassie's face. "I don't care what ID you're showing me. You don't have resident clearance," he was shouting. "Get on the ground now, or I will consider you a threat." Cassie stood perfectly still, her hands visible, her face composed in a way that only years of facing actual danger could teach someone. She had recognized instantly that Marcus almost certainly didn't have the proper licensing to carry that weapon as a private security guard. "Marcus, what the hell are you doing?" I shouted, rushing forward. "That's my daughter." Marcus didn't lower his weapon immediately, his face flushed with the thrill of power. "Your daughter should have checked in with security," he sneered, finally lowering the gun after what seemed like an eternity. "We have protocols here, Mr. Sterling. No exceptions, even for FBI agents, if that ID is even real." Cassie just stood there silently, studying Marcus with the focused attention of someone memorizing every detail for later. Only when the gun was completely lowered did she speak, her voice measured and precise. "Mr. Finch, I believe you should be aware that pointing a firearm at a federal officer without cause is a felony. Additionally, I don't believe you have the proper licensing to carry that weapon as a security guard in this state." The color drained from Marcus's face, but his arrogance quickly reasserted itself. "This is private property. Different rules apply here," he said, though with noticeably less conviction. "I'll be reporting this incident to Mr. Thorne. Expect to hear from the HOA board." I ushered Cassie inside, my hands shaking. "I'm so sorry about that, sweetheart. That was completely unacceptable." Cassie gave me a reassuring hug. "It's okay, Dad. I've faced worse. But I think we need a long-term strategy for dealing with these guys. That man is dangerous, not because he's skilled, but because he's insecure and armed. That's always a bad combination." As we sat in the kitchen that night, she asked pointed questions about the HOA, their operations, and Marcus Finch. Her analytical mind was already at work. "Sometimes," she said thoughtfully, "the most interesting cases aren't the big terrorist plots. Sometimes it's the small-town tyrants abusing their little kingdoms that need the most attention." The next morning, Victor Thorne and his wife, Eleanor, showed up at our door. Victor held a formal letter of warning in his hand. "Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice full of artificial warmth, "we need to discuss last night's unfortunate incident." I felt my diplomatic training battling with my parental instinct to tell him where to shove that letter. "Unfortunate incident?" I repeated. "Your security guard pointed a loaded weapon at my daughter's face. It was illegal and dangerous." Victor's smile didn't waver, though his eyes hardened. "Our security team was simply following protocol." "Had you properly registered your guest?" I cut him off. "My daughter is not a guest. She's my family, and no protocol justifies drawing a weapon on an unarmed person." Cassie appeared beside me. "Mr. Thorne, I'd be interested to know if all your security personnel are properly licensed for armed work in this state. I noticed some irregularities last night that concerned me." Victor's smile flickered. "All our staff meet the highest standards, Miss Sterling. Now, if you'll accept this formal warning, we can put this matter behind us." He held out the envelope, which neither of us moved to take. "I don't think we will be accepting that," Cassie said pleasantly. "But I appreciate you stopping by." She closed the door gently but firmly. Over the next few days, the Cold War escalated. Marcus began parking his security vehicle across from our house, an obvious intimidation tactic. I noticed other changes too. Neighbors who had been friendly suddenly became scarce. Cassie spent hours on her laptop making quiet phone calls. She'd found a professional ally in Samantha Hayes, an attorney on the HOA board, who had grown increasingly uncomfortable with Victor's leadership. She also reconnected with an old friend from the academy, Officer Miller, who now served with the local police department. When I asked what she was researching, she showed me a disturbing pattern. Marcus had been dismissed from the police force for excessive force complaints, and Victor had personally intervened to get him hired. More concerning, the security company was paying Marcus significantly more than standard rates for his position. "There's something not right with the finances here," she murmured. "The HOA fees are among the highest in the state, but the services don't match the expenditure." She tapped another document. "Did you know Victor owns 3 investment properties in this community through shell companies? Properties that mysteriously never receive violation notices despite clear infractions?" A week later, the annual HOA meeting provided the perfect opportunity for the showdown. When the floor opened for questions, I raised my hand. "I noticed the security expenditures have increased over 30% over last year, but there's no itemization of those costs. Could you provide a breakdown?" The room went quiet. Detailed questions weren't part of the usual script. Victor's smile tightened. "The board has reviewed and approved all expenditures," I persisted. "But don't we have the right to know exactly what we're paying for?" The treasurer shuffled his papers nervously, while Victor's face reddened. "The detailed financials are available to board members only." He moved to continue, but Samantha Hayes surprisingly spoke up. "Actually, I'm on the board, and I don't recall seeing the itemized security expenses either." A murmur spread through the room as Victor shot Samantha a look of pure venom. The tension was palpable. Victor abruptly declared the meeting adjourned. As we walked to our car, a security vehicle suddenly blocked our path. Marcus approached my window, his expression smug. "Sir, your car is in violation of the HOA parking regulations. The angle exceeds the permitted 15 degrees from the curb." It was such a blatant harassment tactic that I nearly laughed. But Cassie placed a warning hand on my arm. She pulled out her phone and dialed. "Officer Miller?" "Yes, it's Cassie Sterling. I'm at the Maple Creek Estates Community Center, and we're having an issue with security personnel blocking our vehicle and making false claims about violations. Could you send someone over?" The transformation in Marcus's demeanor was instantaneous. His face paled as he realized she wasn't bluffing. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding," he muttered, signaling his colleague to move the security vehicle. The final act began when our security cameras captured Marcus and another guard returning after midnight. This time, they deliberately damaged our garden, uprooting plants and spray painting an obscene message on our fence. When I saw the footage the next morning, I was livid, but Cassie placed a restraining hand on my arm. "This is exactly what we need," she said, her voice calm but her eyes sparkling with determination. "They're getting desperate, making mistakes. Each one strengthens our position." She made a phone call. "It's time," she said simply. "We need support for the next phase." The following weekend, the emergency HOA meeting was packed. When Victor moved to the First Amendment, which would grant security personnel unrestricted access to all properties, I raised my hand. "Point of order," I said, standing. "Before we vote on new powers for the board, I believe residents should be fully informed about how the current powers have been exercised." I methodically presented the evidence Cassie and our allies had gathered. The security company that receives a huge portion of our fees is owned by Eleanor's brother-in-law and employs guards without proper licensing. The landscaping contract was awarded to Victor's former college roommate at 60% above market rate. And perhaps most concerning, I continued, is that over $300,000 collected for infrastructure improvements cannot be accounted for. The treasurer, looking increasingly panicked, blurted out, "I just processed the paperwork Victor gave me. I didn't know about the shell companies." Cassie, who had remained deliberately unobtrusive, now stepped forward. "I believe the residents should see exactly what constitutes appropriate questioning in Maple Creek Estates." She connected her phone to the projector, and the room was filled with the security camera footage of Marcus pointing his gun at her face, followed by additional footage of Marcus and his team vandalizing our property. The gasps from the assembled neighbors were audible. What happened next occurred so quickly that many residents couldn't follow the sequence of events. Marcus, pushed beyond his limited self-control by the public exposure, lunged toward me with a roar of rage. His hand moved toward his concealed weapon, and several people screamed. Before anyone else could react, Cassie moved with the fluid precision of her tactical training, intercepting Marcus and disarming him with a series of movements so efficient they appeared almost casual. One moment, Marcus was charging forward with murderous intent. The next, he was face down on the floor, his own handcuffs securing his wrist. Officer Miller immediately took control, officially arresting him. As Marcus was led away, Victor made a desperate dash for the exit, only to find an FBI agent named Chris Valdez waiting with identification in hand. "Victor Thorne, I'm Special Agent Chris Valdez with the FBI. I'd like to ask you some questions regarding the financial discrepancies in the HOA accounts." As Victor was escorted out for questioning, the gathered residents sat in stunned silence for a few moments before erupting into chaotic discussion. When the dust settled, Cassie and I walked home in the warm evening air, a strange sense of peace settling between us. Was all this really necessary? I asked her, genuinely curious. Couldn't we have just reported Marcus for brandishing a weapon that first night and been done with it? Cassie considered the question thoughtfully. We could have, but that would have addressed only a symptom, not the disease. What was happening here wasn't just about one bad security guard. It was about a systemic abuse of power that affected everyone. I'm trained to look at the bigger picture. One rogue security guard is a police matter. A coordinated scheme to defraud homeowners while using intimidation tactics to silence opposition? That's something worth dismantling properly. Now, 3 months have passed. The criminal investigations resulted in multiple charges against Victor for embezzlement and fraud. Marcus faced a separate set of charges related to his illegal weapons possession and assault. The most profound change, however, was in the community itself. Samantha Hayes was elected the new HOA president. Community events became genuinely inclusive, and neighbors who had previously avoided each other now stopped to chat. One evening, as Cassie and I sat on our porch before her departure for a new assignment, Eleanor Thorne unexpectedly appeared at our gate. "I wanted to apologize before I leave permanently," she said hesitantly. "I knew about some of what Victor was doing. Not all of it, but enough that I should have spoken up. I convinced myself it wasn't hurting anyone." Cassie regarded her thoughtfully. "Why did you participate in it, Eleanor?" "You must have known it was wrong." Eleanor's composure cracked slightly. "My entire identity was wrapped up in being Mrs. Victor Thorne, the Queen of Maple Creek. I was nobody before I married him. The status, the respect. I became addicted to it. Now I'm starting over at 55 with nothing but alimony and regrets." I felt a surprising twinge of sympathy for her, recognizing the universal human desire for significance that had led her down such a destructive path. As Cassie and I sat on the porch steps after our guests had departed, I told her what I'd been thinking. You could have handled him yourself. Instead, you orchestrated a complete community transformation. Why? Cassie considered her glass thoughtfully before answering. Growing up watching you work, I learned that true diplomacy isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about transforming it into something constructive. The strategy wasn't about revenge, Dad. It was about restoration. Sometimes you don't need to fire a weapon to win a battle. Sometimes understanding the game your opponent is playing and turning it to your advantage is the greatest victory of all. So what do you think? Was she right to play the long game? Or should she have just taken them down on day one? What's the best way to handle a corrupt HOA? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.